Welcome to another segment of the conversation with Dr. Nahed Murad. I've been so excited ever since you agreed to come on my stream to have this conversation about Middle East and North Africa, particularly the areas that I love around the region, the whole dynamics of of geopolitics and everything in between. So welcome to the stream. Maybe you can take a
You.
minute to introduce yourself.
Well, first, thank you. It's an honor to be here as usual. I love having conversations with you about this in general. My field is usually in media propaganda, the tools that are used with internal to the machines when it, yeah, and how that translates cognitively to a people. And the past 2 years, I think you and I agree that the machine has gone into hyperdrive. I like the questions that you've sent over, and I think that I've been excited to talk more generally about this issue because I feel like we're stuck. We've plateaued. So,
Yeah, we've been having this conversation for exactly 2 years. I
right.
mean, the players are more or less shifting ground in some areas, but if you look at the general outlook of the situation, it hasn't really changed. Well, Israel is doing this, and Iran is doing that, and Lebanon is doing that, but the conversation have not really, you know, moved an inch. If you like, I mean, it's here and there, but it hasn't really moved an inch. So I want to start from one very important position, which is the situation in Lebanon, which is a country that I know very well you're familiar with. And there's a reason I want to start from Lebanon. Lebanon is one of the most important regions, in the Eastern
It is.
Mediterranean corridor. So what is really going on with the Lebanese government pushing Hezbollah to disarm? Can you speak generally on it? What are the centripetal and the centrifugal factors, and how does this affect the political situation in Lebanon and in the region?
Yeah, it's a little complex in spite of the fact that Lebanon is such a small country. Strategically, it's placed at the mouth of the sea, which makes the port of Beirut probably the most strategic port, both militarily and from a shipping routes perspective. If you look at the Mediterranean, it's for every other empire. The port of Beirut has always been kind of the crown jewel, the possession that they've always wanted for those reasons. When it comes to disarming any resistance, not just Hezbollah, Hezbollah's at the front of this because they are no longer a militia. They are very much a formidable paramilitary force in the region. And as you and I know, the larger an organization like this grows, the more it starts to compete in the real world with actual militaries, because most of today's militaries use mercenary armies anyway. This problem with Hezbollah at the front of it actually started back in 2000. So, just at the cusp of liberation, May of the year 2000, as the sentiment, pro resistance sentiment in Lebanon grew. So, outside of the core of South Lebanon, where they fought, out into the other areas in Lebanon, this became a concern for America, a real concern. I will come back to it later in one of the other questions, but it's a concern because it pokes at something America has spent little time on, the difference between Shias and Sunnis in the Middle East. And that is something that America did not spend a lot of time consuming properly the literature on, and thus it dabbles in it with chaos. Enter Hezbollah from 82 to the 2000s and guaranteeing what was then considered a success short of divinity, right? 2000, we liberate the resistance liberates South Lebanon. The army is in acquiescence with this. There are no issues with the army. At the time, this was an executive order from the president that allowed the resistance to take hold. It also allows the resistance to have legal arms. So the Hezbollah arms in Lebanon are actually technically legal according to Lebanese law. What they're fighting about, however, and how this disarmament came about is when it came to the Shib'a farms and the Golan Heights. Between 2000 and 2005, the rest of the world's superpowers, and that includes the super ones, America, Russia, China, etc., but also the smaller ones with interests in the area, Turkey, Iran, any of the smaller countries that were building themselves at the time to become the powers that they are today. And a lot of money and investment went into creating chaos in Lebanon, where I don't know if you remember this, but in early 2000, in February, began this slew of assassinations that lasted roughly 2 years, starting with Rafiq al Hariri. And the point of that, now in hindsight, was to disarm Hezbollah. Because for the next 10 years from Hariri, there's a lot of money and effort in the media being put towards Hezbollah and towards making them look bad. That doesn't work. Enter Syria in the early 2010s, and here we are today. So this is not new. It's about submitting to the West. It's about removing any and all powers that stand in opposition to the greater Israel project. Does that mean that Lebanon as a government is for the greater Israel project? No, absolutely not. I don't think you could get a Lebanese person in government to actually flat out say, I don't think Israel has expansionist projects here. What they're trying to do, however, is walk a really tight rope with the Americans, considering Lebanon's economy is beyond depleted. So that's kind of the precarious place we're in. But do I believe that disarmament is feasible even? Absolutely not. And are they planning it in a feasible way? No. So, and I think Layla talked about this on your previous podcast. She explained it a lot more at length. Um, but yeah, that's where I would sit that for now.
Yeah. So my question on that again, because I want to hold you down on Lebanon a little bit, is that you're saying, well, these are external forces, regional power, you know, mid-level powers in the region, trying to influence politics in Lebanon to put them on a higher pedestal. And you mentioned one of those actors, which is Israel. But I want us to focus on the internal, which are the centripetal factors in this case. Which are the what is the role of other players in Lebanon apart from Hezbollah? Because I know of Amal as well, and there's also because Lebanon is structured in such a way that is unknown to any other part of the any other country in the world. So,
Sure.
would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Resistances come and go. So far, Hezbollah has been the strongest, most consistent, and uh, face forward towards the Israelis. However, arms in Lebanon are not scarce. There's no paucity of armed paramilitias in Lebanon. Amal is an armed militia in Lebanon that does not necessarily actively fight with Hezbollah in the way that people make it sound. They are responsible for many, in fact, a lot of the social services that Hezbollah relies on in the south of Lebanon, but less militant, more police services, security services, things of the type. This, in times like now, can create a real friction because you have people facing internally like Amal in coalition with the people facing externally like Hezbollah. And with Nabih Berri seating as the Speaker of the House in one of the presidency seats, it becomes way more complicated because he is the de facto leader of Harakat Amal. So that can get complicated, and they're paying a lot for that. There's a lot that can go into that. What won't work is that the Shias are already a very precarious minority in Lebanon, and they've learned over the past 100 years of this that fighting amongst each other actually doesn't work. It depletes their own population over others. That's where other types of armed militias come in, all the way to the right wing militias. We have, as far as I would say, like the Kuwait are probably the most right wing militia, armed militia in Lebanon. They
Yeah.
are the,
You just hold on a little bit because again, my audience would want to understand what you're saying. You're referring to the
yes,
Uwets. So,
yeah,
who are the Uwets, and what faction do they represent? Is it does it represent a particular religious faction in Lebanon?
yes,
In Lebanon,
yeah, hyper Christian Maronite. That doesn't mean all Maronites are Kuwait, but that is kind of what they are. So they are hyper right wing conservatives, conservatives for the Middle East, conservative politics. They believe in normalization. They were the first to actually fight hand in hand with the Israelis during the 70s and 80s. And they are known as the armed militant portion of the Kataib. So, and they all fall
Qatar,
under the large phalangist rank.
yeah,
Are they
phalanges.
active anymore? No.
Yeah.
Most
So,
modern,
just a quick one.
yeah,
Weren't there other groups within the the whole Christian grouping at that time that also fought against the Uwed, like the
Yeah,
former president Michel Aoun. I remember was
right.
also among those that fought against the Uwed.
Yeah. Michel Aoun was the general of the army at the time, had clashes with Jaja. Both received their punishments. Michel Aoun was exiled to France. Jaja was imprisoned for 25 years. Um, and again, these are the layered effects of having dynasties in power. So, one of the biggest mockeries in Lebanon is we actually don't have politicians. These are just dynasties passing the buck from one parent to the child to the next to the next. So, but as far as their actual power in the country, it's slim to none. If you were to poll Lebanese people today, as far as the armed militant wing, not Kata'ib, Kuwait, they're slim to none and few. And it's an ironic thing because Christians in general in Lebanon have better education, like access to better education, and thus they get educated better, faster. They have access to the West. Most Christian kids in Lebanon are out of Lebanon by 18 years old so that they can go study in France or in
In
Switzerland, etc.,
Canada,
etc., Canada.
yeah.
Right. And that tends to, whether you like it or not, deplete the need or the grit to hold arms in Lebanon. They're coming back as engineers, they're coming back as et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of interesting. So
I'll get to the
outside
question.
is yeah, so outside Israel, what are the other players in the region that have so much interest in Lebanon that is
Many.
putting pressure on the political system in Lebanon? Outside Israel, what are the other
Saudi.
players?
Right now, Saudi. Right now, the biggest player in Lebanon is Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Those are the biggest players in Lebanon. They have the most money to shell around, and money goes a long way in a country that's economically crippled.
But hold on a
So,
second. You said, did you say Saudi Arabia? I don't mean to
what?
interrupt you, but you said Saudi Arabia. But
Mhm.
from the outside, we don't hear anything about the Saudis.
I know
It's
because they're good
Iran,
at it.
Iran. Iran has a goal of destabilizing the region. And even the Israelis are saying it. So we have to go to
I'm not
Lebanon and
denying that.
Syria because of Iran. So you said the Saudis are the biggest player by far because of the
Biggest
resources.
player.
Yeah. Can you explain
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So there's no denying that Iran has interests in the area. To call them interests of chaos is kind of the linguistic trick they go with. It's not necessarily interests of chaos, but they definitely have interests in the area. Iran is not fighting for Palestine or for Lebanon. Um, for like sure there's grit, there's ideology, and we'll get to that later. A lot of what Iran is today is actually the ethos of resistance. It That's what it has as an ethos as a country. Saudi Arabia wants to create from Lebanon what it was trying to do with Hariri in the early 2000s. It wants to recreate this idea of the Paris of the Middle East, a place where a small elite of people can run around in bikinis in Beirut while the rest of them can't eat. That's pretty much the logic there. Saudis enjoy Lebanon, they always have. All jokes aside, they like Lebanese women, they like Lebanese men, they like Lebanese food. It's a great place to be, but also the people to people ties. Saudi has way more people to people ties to Lebanon than Iran does. So, in spite of the fact that the South Lebanese are for the most part Shias, and they are 12ers, they're not Irani, they're not Persians, they're Arabs from South Lebanon. And a lot of them, their parents, their grandparents used to go work in Saudi Arabia back in the day in the oil boom. So there are a lot of people to people ties between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon in a way where it just can't get away with meddle. It can't get away with not meddling. Sorry.
Yeah, so it is Saudi Arabia, it is Iran for their geopolitical aspirations. And
Right.
recently, the Israelis are claiming that they've clipped the wings of Iran in Lebanon. So if they've clipped the wings of Iran and Saudi Arabia is an ally of Israel, does it still make sense for these countries to be pushing hard on Lebanon to make additional concessions or to beat them to acquiescence like they're doing? The pressure from the outside on a very small country It's enormous. And what is the role of France? I need to add this because
No,
the French are also interested in Lebanon. So, what is the interest
yeah.
of France, and what are they doing actively to protect this interest?
Honestly, their interests haven't changed. That interest is non-dynamic. It's quite static in time. France's interests are in all the money and infrastructure that it has built in Lebanon, and it's literally just trying to kind of maintain that. It's taken a very backroom stance to this. I have not seen much to be talked about from France here, in spite of many Christian communities who rely heavily on French funding seeking that help. It has not worked. So it seems like France has taken a hands off approach to this when it comes to Lebanon, and it's letting Saudi and Iran figure it out. I would also disagree because I would have agreed with you 2 years ago. Things have changed since 2 years ago. Yes, 2 years ago, Saudi and Iran were walking, sorry, Saudi and Israel were walking hand in hand to the same goal. Today, they're not. Saudi's expansionist project is bigger than Israel's expansionist project. And thus,
Hey, really?
yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
love to know more about this.
Well, just,
Because
I mean,
for Israel is territory, is strategic depth, is the Greater Israel Project, and it's also what they call the David Corridor, which runs south of Lebanon, south of Syria, all the way through the Iraqi border to the Kurdish areas in Rojava. So how is it?
right,
How is the Saudi interest in terms of geopolitical aspirations and ambitions in Lebanon bigger than that of Israel?
labor. So Saudi has a poorly laborious uh, uh,
Society.
population. Yeah, they do not labor. They do not study. It has one of the lowest rates of people actually getting higher education. They are heavily privileged and they live life. So, what they've realized now, 75, 80 years in, is that that doesn't actually secure you into the future. So, what they've taken on is America par excellence, capitalism through economic expansion, not physical expansion, which is the opposite of what Israel wants. And that's why I'm saying today they're not walking hand in hand anymore. I assume, and there's no evidence for this, we'll figure this out later, I assume. But my assumption is that at some point with MBS, if you look at their NEOM project and the projects for the line and all of those high tech climate housing initiative projects that Saudi discusses and spends an insane amount of money on, they include parts of Gaza, they include parts of the West Bank, and they include all of Lebanon. Those are all included in the project. So I assume at some point they were walking hand in hand with the Israelis, and that was all okay with the Israelis under normalization talks. October 7th really did change things. Like it shifted the path of where this was originally planned to go. I don't think that Saudi Arabia honestly agreed to this much violence. Saudi Arabia does not have this in it. So I think
Yeah. So
it's caused by the violence.
yeah. So what is the end game of Israel in Lebanon? Let's start from Lebanon. What is the end
All of
game?
Lebanon.
Because we see what they are doing
All of
now, but
they
what
will
is
be
the
they want to be in Beirut within 6 days flat. So the moment you hear a ground invasion, expect them to have a goal in their mind from Litani to Beirut in 6 days flat. That's why they're
to
trying to disarm.
to
Yeah,
invade and occupy and stay there?
fully. Yeah. Yeah, and then they will
That
do the same, rinse and repeat. So they'll do the same they did last time. They'll coalesce with the Syrian forces. The Syrian forces will come in to actually enforce this because they don't have the troops. And then the Lebanese will have to fight Syrian forces the same way they did last time until their exit in 2006.
but this doesn't make
That's
sense. It is it's how would I
rinse
say
and
it's
repeat.
is a of course it's rinse and repeat, but is it even something they can afford to
No,
to do because they don't have the manpower, and
no,
it's stupid because the idea of you know the idea is to have a concentration of maximum force within a single strategic objective, in this case Israel. The territory itself is small, but they have a small population. So don't you think it's foolish to try to expand with this little
yeah,
population?
yeah, yeah. I think it's foolish what they've been doing for the past. 1 year, 6 months, 4 days to the dot. So after we passed the 3 month term, it had become an existential issue. It's not even about the Greater Israel Project anymore. This is an issue of existence for Israel. And we can see that from the fact that it's not actually strategically planning warfare. So,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's
which is
crazy.
why
The
they'll
whole.
have to use. So look at where Syria is. So think if Israel comes in from exactly rinse and repeat the last scenario, come in from the south, right? And right
The
now,
com.
under the current terms, they would have access all the way to the Litani River. So technically to the Nabatiya government, which is like right at that peak there. And then
So this
if
is
you bring this
Naria in the north, Maalot in the north. This is
yeah,
Israel. Then this is Nabatea.
right. So imagine if they do that, and then from Syria enter forces exactly like last time, rinse and repeat through Trablus, through Tripoli. They will
In the
manage
north.
Beirut in less than 6 days. Yeah,
So Tripoli is in the north.
yeah, yeah. That's how
Wow.
you get Lebanon. You squeeze it from both sides. They know the formula. It's a very simple formula. Look at it. It's a tiny little country.
Yeah, it's a very small country, and if you control the coast and you control the borders in the south, that's it. Beirut,
Right.
they just sit in Beirut, and it's a small country. Although it has a diaspora population, but it doesn't have like enough population at home. I don't think. What is the population of Lebanon? What is the approximate population of Lebanon?
I mean, very like right now, I would say about 12 million in the country, not more than that, and there's about 20 abroad.
Yeah. So yeah, it has a huge diaspora population.
Discrepancy.
So
Yeah,
and can you make the same argument about the objectives or the ambitions of Israel in Lebanon for Syria? And if they want Syria, again, I said the idea of occupying Lebanon and controlling it is a dumb idea for the government in Jerusalem.
agree.
But look at Syria. Syria is like 20 times, 10 times the size of Israel or even the size of Lebanon. Would they be able to do it? And where would this put them, in terms of the interest of Turkey in Syria as well?
Yeah, Syria is going to be the biggest ground battle. I'm not as worried about Lebanon. Syria is going to be the largest ground battle because there Israel is going to be fighting the inherent population. So let's assume out of 25 million Syrians, 5 million won't accept Israeli occupation because there's always people who don't accept it. So there you have a population that won't accept it, a population that had lived already the two Assads and a small interim under this new interim presidency. Um, so a non-welcoming population, and then you'll have Russians, Turks, Kurds. Kurds have strong influence in the area as well. You have native Assyrian populations. Um, and then you're fighting America, Iran. It's back to square one in Syria again.
Yeah,
And they
because the
will
Kurds
fight each
are.
other in Syria.
So the Kurds are mostly in the area of Raqqa all the way to Al Hasaka in the north,
Right.
north is it in the northeast or the northeast? And again,
Northeast.
the Turks have their own ambitions in Syria as well. I was having a conversation with the sister, the last time, and we talked about the presence of Turkey. So if you look at this map, you see the port of Iskenderun. This is it in the Hatay region. Used to be Syrian in the 30s, and the Turks took it from them. Now they've consolidated their stronghold on this. It's a very strategic area. If you look
Right.
at it, it's like you
This.
know this area used to be Syrian, and they took it. The Syrians have always maintained that they want their land back. And now
Yeah.
what has happened after Jolani came to power is that area is gone forever, and the Mount Hermon is gone, the Golan Heights is gone. What is your opinion on the new leadership in Syria?
Um, it's not leadership. It's a placeholder. And I think any reasonable Syrian recognizes that he is a placeholder for something. I am concerned that it is a placeholder for something America has cooked up. Um, this person specifically, though, I mean, he is a um, known philanderer of human rights. So it's nothing new to Syria, I would say. um, and there, to me, the comparison is not any different. Like if you were, I'm not Syrian, but if I were, I wouldn't see any difference between Bashar al-Assad and this new one, other than who Bashar is bending over for versus who these guys are bending over for. So it's, they're literally just trading the evil at this point. But Syria is a lot more interweaved, I would say, than Lebanon, in spite of what we hear.
Yeah, yeah, but during the so-called revolution, that removed Assad, which was a brutal, bitter civil war that went on for over 10 years, if not close to
14 years,
15
yeah.
years. Yeah, close to 15 years. And there were people celebrating in Idlib that
Yeah,
Hassan Nasrallah was gone because Nasrallah has sent some of his men to go to Syria. Although, the explanation at that time was that Lebanon was protecting its interests because you had people crossing in
we did.
from the from the borders, Baalbek, Al Qusair. I remember the incident in Al Qusair where they were crossing in and, basically kidnapping soldiers. And then Hezbollah entered the fold on the invitation of the Assad government. So there were people in Idlib, in the north of Syria, if you can look at you see the map, which is very
Right,
close, where most of those people that the talks have allowed in from all over the world to come and fight in the holy jihad, in quotes,
right,
we're celebrating basically, and they were celebrating across Syria. And some of them have accepted this government as a defender of the people. And even after Assad was removed, they were like, oh, finally the tyrant is gone. And they were showing the Sednaya prison and so on and so forth. What has changed? It's still the same guy, it's still Jolani. He was in Al Qaeda. He was a boy of Abu Musab al Zakawi. The guy,
right,
said that Al Qaeda was too weak and fought with ISIS. Then, from there, Jabhat al Nusra and now Hayat Tahrir al Sham, or
right.
HTS as they call it. So, what has really
Which has
changed?
already, by the way, split into three factions. It's not the same anymore. They've already split into three factions already since 6 months ago. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So it's interesting. What again? This is my question.
the only thing I can
Is
say about him is they took the Walmart version of Bin Laden and dressed him up as the Walmart version of Ben Affleck. That's the best I can give you. But it's a
Yeah.
show. It's political theater. Um, it's political theater first and foremost for the Israelis and Israeli supporters out there in the world. It's less theater for the Arab world. Secondary is it's theater for the Arab world. And because it's theater for the Israelis, it's why personally, even though I saw those videos and I personally saw those things, I don't think it's really, look, I have never been in a situation where I was starved and terrified for 14 years of my life of a goon that I
Mhm,
don't know. And suddenly someone maybe paid me 20 bucks and said, hold up this sign. Like you and I know how this works in media. I'm not denying
mhm.
that a lot of Syrians hate certain people or so on and so forth. Again, trauma is trauma. But the fact that they shed the light on this, that the media shed light on this, was in fact to create the division uh, more and more, to cement this division. So I don't really have a problem with it. I say I hope that Syria does not fall into the inevitable of what is planned for it. But unfortunately, that's just hope. From the evidence on the ground, it looks like Syria has fallen and will continue to fall further.
Yeah, so you see a scenario of like a repeat of Sykes-Picot, carving up of Syria,
Oh
because
yeah,
what is
we are
left of,
in.
of Syria,
Yeah, I would say we are in the middle of the reconfiguration of New Sykes-Picot, which is the, again, credit to what you're saying. I don't see Giuliani sticking around for too long. They'll have the CIA will have him out in no time. Like it's not a, he's a placeholder for something better they're working on.
again, consider me dumb. Why would the CIA do that? You basically have Trump in Saudi Arabia after the Saudis. And again, this goes back to your point about Saudi Arabia, which we'll come back to. The Saudis have lobbied and spent a lot of money. In fact, Trump was in the Middle East region
He
for
was.
3 or 4 days. Three countries gave him over a trillion. I don't know the actual number. It's between a trillion and 2 trillion, depending on who you listen to. Most of it
Right.
promises of investment, hundreds of billions of dollars in armed contract, a $400 million plane from the Qataris. So, and he went in and basically with one statement, whitewashed Jolani, and this guy is now the Che Guevara of our time. He's no longer a terrorist. The $10 million bounty on his head is gone. And even in the lead up to that, we were hearing, the media started putting it out, the moderate jihadists, and then from there to Ahmed al-Shara, and these things keep coming back. So again, it seems to me that the more you think you understand, the closer you get to the situation, the more complicated it becomes. And for
It
those
is.
of you from the region, it seems easy. For us on the outside, what the hell is
Yeah.
going on in the Middle East?
Well, America's interests in the area are not new. They're super clear and they've always been clear. There's no new CIA assets to what people call the Middle East, which is actually the Near East. It's nowhere near the Middle or the East, it's just the
Mhm.
Near East. The CIA assets, like it has 17 different asset plans in a country the size of Lebanon. I can't imagine it has anything less than 50 assets for Syria. It's all the reasons that we know America to do things, everything based in capitalism, consumerism, to create for trade routes. They're worried about. Um,
China.
well, so yeah, most of it is to curtail China. 90% of what is happening is curtailing China and keeping a Rottweiler in front of the Russians. The Russians
Hmm.
have more interest there than anybody. China is slowly creeping in and has cemented itself because it doesn't interfere. So that's why the
And
CIA is there.
yeah, you're right. You're right. And the Chinese are, but the Chinese are very, very smart. They're investing in
Yep,
ports, which look like civilian infrastructure. But
yep,
just like you said, they're expanding through economic means and not through brutal sheer power, naked power, so to speak.
yep.
Say, oh, we don't want to intervene in your politics. We are a friend of nobody and we are a business partner of everybody. So you look at Ukraine, they're selling is it drones to both Ukraine and to Russia. In fact, most of the components of the drones that have been manufactured, 90% of the drones being manufactured in the world, even the ones that Turkey is making, most of the
Yeah,
components are coming from China. The
absolutely.
drone is changing the game and again to the ports, Haifa, they're investing in ports, in Syria and around the region. So again, even though they are not politically on ground with the boots on the ground, they are also making an impact economically. And that brings me to the point about Russia. It seems that Russia is the one carrying the political water for China and holding
Yeah,
the place for China, enabling China to be present in the Eastern Med, which is the battleground. It to be the final point. So
yeah,
whatever the Israelis are doing today, I mean, is for the time being. If the
agreed.
status quo change tomorrow and America loses its power for whatever reason, war in Taiwan, or the escalation of conflict in Central Asia or beyond, and even with the New Deal, people speak about the Zangezou corridor. I don't want to take it to so many places, but it is
No,
changing. It's constantly in flux. What the hell is going on in the Middle East? It's the most complex place politically in the world. That the more you think you understand, the more difficult or the more confused it becomes. Yeah, it's
it is. Think think of the Near East as the linchpin for the entrance into New World Order. What we're feeling, what we're watching, what we're experiencing is the fall of Chamberlain's appeasement policies, policies that use soft power, but at the end of the day, bring brawn to the table. Uh, these need to go. Near East, Africa, especially I would say North Africa, both East and Western coast have had absolutely enough of the effects of both soft and hard power on them. And in the past 2 decades, after tasting China's mid level interference, just like build some telecom towers and give people some internet type of interference, we've gotten a taste for the good life in the Near East. So I view this, and I viewed October 7th. I believe you and I talked about it from the beginning. I told you this is it, Sav. This is the beginning of the end, and it's going to
the
be a
end.
rocky boat. We're going. I expect to see Saudi. Someone put it in here. I expect Saudi and Iran. I'm going to give it 60 days, but I'm probably wrong. It's probably way closer than 60. Saudi and Iran are about to make a friendship pact like Italy and France in the world wars, which will shift things around because Saudi is a country that doesn't have thug. It just doesn't have that. It has money, it has gold, it has Mecca. It doesn't have brawn. It tried to brawn over Yemen and failed miserably and needed America. So there's no way it's going to brawn through this. And Iran has shown that even though it's an underdog, it is willing to use military power. So this terrifies Saudi, by the way. Saudi had its eggs in the basket of Iran will never do anything.
Yeah,
The
but
Iranian war
that,
is about to start again. Yeah.
yeah, so you're 100% positive on this, that
Yeah.
the situation in Iran, what we have with Israel, is basically a stalemate, that we might see
Oh yeah, we're on pause.
a resuscitation of the situation, basically.
Oh yeah, and it'll be a blow up. Like I don't expect it'll be like last time, phone calls and being ready and waiting for things. No, 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 no. Um, like a pot on reduced heat, eventually it will bubble, like whether we like it or not. This is and we already see, like if you follow Irani news, there's already
Mhm.
mobilization of Irani forces. There's mobilization of Hezbollah and any and all affiliate to Hezbollah forces in the area, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Like it's a widespread network of
Yeah.
resistance. So
Yeah,
uh,
but Iran, although Iran is very strategic, if I can pull
it
up
is.
the map in a second, but it has a lot of geopolitical problems as well with the neighbors. Afghanistan is one of it. There's a population there that is, it's a lot of problems in Afghanistan. We can talk about
There
that.
is.
And also there's the Balochi problem in Pakistan. And the Pakistanis are looking to be friends with the Americans again in order to neutralize India. So recently I saw the visit of the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on a visit to Islamabad to see the most powerful man in Pakistan, which is the army chief, Field Marshal Bajwa. Is it
Yeah.
Bajwa? Asim
Hajwa.
Munir.
Yeah. Yeah.
After Bajwa was Asim Munir. So, and what the conversations were, I don't understand. But this was on the backdrop of Asim Munir making two visits in less than 1 month to Washington. So something is definitely cooking in the region. And you're
Mhm.
right. I hope you're wrong. I just don't want this to
Me
blow up
too.
again.
It will.
I hope you're wrong. But is it in anybody's interest for this conflict to go on? And what the
Yes.
hell are the Israelis looking for? Is it just Israel pushing the envelope for this conflict, or is
No.
America looking for something in the region?
You know how I feel about this. I feel that America is actually who trapped Israel into this the whole way through. Personally, that's my own personal opinion, and we'll see what later. Just from a, if you study the media for the past 10 years coming out of America, as well as America's collapse in its own system, it has led to America needing to shed the weight of what it's carrying. So I'm not saying they did October 7th, but they did use it to their advantage and they shifted. They shifted. They have not. I know that we see a lot of American help to Israel. I personally see a lot of shackles. I don't see them helping as much as other people claim they are.
So you
America
don't
will
think,
turn on Israel. Yeah.
yeah, you think America is using Israel as an attack dog while
Yeah.
playing this game of, oh, I'm a middle guy, I'm trying to keep the peace. I don't want Israel to do it, but we have to protect them. But well, we can have conversations with you guys. So it's a game they're playing, right? So
Mhm.
you're saying that America is directly involved in this, and it's not just Israel
Directly.
like everybody's claiming.
No, it's I would say today it's probably mostly America. At this point, I don't the only thing Israel is doing is the wrong move. It's doing not what America is asking it to do. Every time you see a military of some sort, we know that strategically that doesn't make any sense. You're running out of basic MREs for your soldiers. You don't even have food for your soldiers at this point. Their Merkava ACs are broken. It's not going well for them. So
Mhm.
but they
Yeah,
still
if
choose, yeah,
so,
which is
if
not
it's
something
not,
America wants.
yeah, but if it's not going well for them, why are they choosing to continue this
Because
war of
it's like,
attrition in the region? This war of attrition in the region, which is on the long run is more detrimental for their own project, because all the claim is that, oh, we want to live in peace, we want a final solution to this problem, we want to have defined borders. Israel till today does not have defined borders, and they're picking up fight with everybody. And going back to your statement about Iran and what would happen again, does that have anything to do with America now signing an agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan to stay in the north of Iran,
Yeah,
in the area where they're trying to create or an alternative to what they call the Zangezur corridor. On that,
yeah,
and I'll pull up the map in a second, which is
please.
in proximity to one of the biggest cities in Iran, which is Tabriz in the north.
Yeah,
So if America maintains military presence there, with the Israelis already having some sort of military assets in Baku, which is Azerbaijan, which is their ally technically, so there is a real prospect of
yeah,
a burnout, a real war in the region, particularly around the areas of the Caspian Sea and Central Asia.
yeah. Yeah, so as you and I have always discussed, when things escalate to this level, there's very little you can do on land. So it'll have to go to sea. At this point, the Israeli military does not have a great naval fleet. Number one, they're good at air force and dropping dragons on children. Their naval fleet is slim. Um, so we'll be looking. This is how America's power becomes very relevant here. America will take this to sea and win this for everybody, by the way. Um, this has to go to sea. It has cost too many human lives. And again, if you go historically, we take things to sea when it starts to cost too much on land.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And so here's my other question in relations to, again, the whole situation in the Middle East. What do you think? Do you think that the collapse of the American empire will clip the wings of Israel in the Middle East, either again through proxy wars, a breakout of conflict between China and Taiwan? We should drag America into another war of attrition in Asia Pacific. Do you think the demise or the fall of the American empire, if that ever happens, would also change the balance in the region, particularly for Israel? Because the question a lot of people have is, oh, this is only happening because of Israel. Oh, this is only happening because of the Jewish state. What is your opinion on that?
No, I think America caught itself midway through the fall of its empire and decided to throw Israel to the dogs. America has realized that in spite of the fact that its people are never happy with war, they know that that's how America makes the most money and the most impact. And they know that it is through America's troops, boots on the ground, that America has actually guaranteed its superpower status. It has not guaranteed it with consumer products. You can't buy anything like, okay, so here's something not made in America. Like anything I pick up in my house is not going to be made in America. It's probably going to be
Mhm.
made in China. So they failed at that miserably. Even my car, which is American made, is mostly parts from China. Fair? So they lost that completely. That has gone to the east. They're going, and I think you and I have talked about this before. They have a huge, huge battle coming up, the battle for the north. So the battle for the northern waters over Canada as they melt is actually a far bigger battle and requires more naval units and more boots on the ground than anything the Near East will ever require. What America it is really good at is exporting systems. So it exports chaos such as insurgency. We saw that in Iraq. We saw that in Libya. We saw that a little bit in Masr. It can export prison systems. You
And
from Nigeria
democracy.
know this best. Yes, exactly.
And democracy. Well, I mean, by the way, I have a completely different opinion on this.
Right, me
And
too. So
when you
that's
say
its way of
system,
sending democracy. Yeah,
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 yeah, because for us in this part of the world, when we hear democracy, we think of bombs in Libya, we think of the
right,
destruction in Syria, we think of non-governmental organizations, we think of multinationals, we think of so-called
right,
NGOs that are coming in, we think of big pharmaceutical companies, all of them infiltrating and penetrating our societies with ease and making things difficult and also influencing the politics. Because this
right.
is what they feel. It has to be liberal, Western, capitalist system of democracy, which must be imported from the United States and copy pasted on these countries in Africa that have a completely different system historically to what you have in the West.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it tries to export that. It fails. Instead, it exports prison systems like in Sudan, in South America, Nigeria, any of the countries that have enough space to build a prison. America's ready to build a prison there and ship off prisoners. these prisoners become cheap labor that they can use to exert force on the local population. We know this. I mean, you're from again, you know from your area how these prisons,
Absolutely.
yeah, uh, they will export, and I'm sorry for the words, but this is one of their biggest exports, mediocre, cheap pornography. So anything cheap and pornographic, they will export it to the world because the rest of the world, though it has its own different varieties of pornographies, had not gotten to the cheapness level of America's pornography. And thus,
Hmm.
as we saw in Iraq, it's a great way to distill and distort the human mind, especially that of a young man. So
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
America's.
There were some horrific images that came out of Abu Ghraib prison during the American
Yes.
invasion and destruction of Iraq. But I want to draw your attention to another thing that is happening, which is gold. Sorry, I don't know. So gold. So basically, this is from ADV ratings. If you
Yeah.
can see my screen.
No,
So
not yet.
let's look at the gold. Okay, not yet. Give me a second. I'm
It's
trying
like
to pull it
looping.
up. I have to. Okay, stop sharing the screen. I have to start again. Just give me a second. So I'm trying to show you this. Okay, I think it's up now. So how do I expand this? I need to, maybe I need to, give me a second.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, it's better now. So I'm going to, if I can. So this is gold reserves by country, ADV ratings. So the United States is number one on the list. Let's look at it. Okay, it's clipped a little bit. Let me see how I can make it better. Fantastic. So this is the United States is at number one with over 8,000 tons of gold in gold reserve. Germany is at number two with over 3,000 tons
Yeah,
in gold reserve. Then France is at number four. You have all these countries, but there's no single African country here. And I'll come to that in a second. If you go all the way down, there's no single African country on this list. And most of them are getting gold from
voodoo.
Africa. So that brings me to the point I was trying to make about Sudan, because you talk about prison system and this export of prison systems to Sudan. What
Yeah,
the other thing they are doing in Sudan as well is that they're taking advantage of the situation and pumping in a lot of weapons to the western part of Sudan to take gold from Sudan, and this has been going on for a very long time, even since the days of Nimeri.
yeah,
They've been using other front countries like the Saudis, and now the Emiratis are the major king players supporting the forces of Hemeti. Yeah, it is. It's an economic war. It's a war to secure trade routes, and it's also a geostrategic poker game, if you like. It's a game. It's a chess game that they are
it is.
playing against each other.
Yeah, so if you
Yeah.
think about it, it's like in the larger scheme, like maybe 1,000 years from now, when they write about this, it'll be clearer. It'll sound a little bit more like, okay, so first they went into Africa and the Near East to literally colonially loot and exploit. So they looted, they exploited, blood diamonds, etc., etc. That once that fell or started to fall little by little, that didn't go away. It just became corporate exploitation. In comes De Beers, in comes all of these large charms, all of these large companies, corporate companies that now do the role that the colonial used to do. And now we're at the end of that because the industrialization and the manufacturing has been depleted everywhere in the world except China. China rules the world in industrialization and manufacturing, and there's really not that much left to loot. I mean, you know better than I do. They've pretty much capped us on what they can loot from us. So now the two biggest resources that anybody competes for really, really, really are water and human resources. Those are the only two resources that people are competing for.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to come back again to the Middle East because I'll be moving in and out of the Middle
Yeah,
East and going back to North
totally.
Africa, which is we talked about the role of Iran in Lebanon and even in Iraq and in Syria, supporting Bashar al-Assad, and they came in with some of their own militias as well. And
Right.
we know that the IRGC did try to prop up with the help of the Russians, Bashar al-Assad. But my question to you is, Why does Iran get the flag and Saudi Arabia get the pass? And this is coming from me as an outsider looking at what is going on in the Middle East. From the Middle Easterners, when you talk about the Saudis, like, oh, well, they are not really good. But when you talk about Iran, it's the amount of hatred, is the rhetoric coming from the large segment of the Middle Eastern population. Why so much hatred and disdain for Iran, considering the fact that Iran is the only one in the region that I see today has any level of power that actually fought against the Israelis. The Saudis have not lifted a single finger. Egypt have signed a $30 billion gas deal with Israel. The talks are providing them with steel for their tanks and continue to enable, shipment of oils from Azerbaijan to Israel. Why Iran, but not Saudi Arabia?
Um, for Middle Easterners, right? Not for outsiders.
Yes, for Middle
Yeah.
Easterners, yes.
So for Middle Easterners, and I'm going to go ahead and classify, most of it will come from the Muslims, and any ideas and ideologies that are coming from someone who isn't Muslim is just perforated from the Muslim people. Um, Iran did absolutely nothing wrong, nor do they necessarily have an issue with Iran politically. The issue with Iran is actually a long-standing religious one, and it's one that the leaders will use in order to rile up the people. So I would say about 40 years now from the rise of Khomeini. So right at the first assassination attempt of Khomeini, I believe it was 89, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but there was a huge, what was called the Shia revival, which isn't necessarily people becoming Shias.
Mm,
It's just the idea of Shia ideologies becoming more prevalent in the Middle East. And what that meant is that we oppose any and all oppressing structures on us because we identify a specific way. Hooray, hooray. This
mhm,
became a real thorn for Saudi Arabia because now we're competing over a holy site. Now think of it from a religious perspective, not from a Palestine, which is a geographical boundary of a land, but from the Dome of the Rock, from a religious holy site where Muhammad flew from Mecca, peace be upon him, to the holy city. The America is actually mostly responsible for this, and it's because America didn't spend a lot of time understanding Shias and was very, as we know from the 80s in Iran, shocked by what happened in Iran. It
mhm,
confused the population. So you will hear a lot of what we refer to as takfiriism, so people referring to Shias or Iranis as kafirs, things like that. These are a religious, political concern over who gets to lead the ummah into the future. It's used politically by all the other people. It's going to be used politically by America because America doesn't give a shit what kind of Muslim we are. It's Islamophobic to both types. It doesn't care. It's going to use whatever exploitative vulnerability it has. And this is something they can exploit.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so I'm sure you've heard it a lot in Africa. There's a lot. If you go on Al Jazeera and just put like Iran makes Shias in Africa, you'll see 40 documentaries from Al Jazeera about Iran Shiafying Africa. Is it actually Shiafying Africa? Probably not. There's probably still a very low minority of Shias in Africa.
I
Has
don't
it
know the
spent?
number close, maybe less than 2%, if not.
Yeah,
I mean, the Iran have close to zero footprint in Africa. The people that are actually flooding Africa with extreme versions of Salafist idea is the Saudis. The building, there's a big mosque in one part of, basically in the southeastern part of Nigeria. There's this place called Ebony State, which
yeah,
are mostly Igbos. They are mostly, prior to, recent times, 99% or 80% of them are Christians, and some of
right.
them are like animists. So, but the Saudis have loaded the region with a lot of money and, the doctrine, which is basically because I'll try to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
this. Let's say there are four branches or the school of jurisprudence, let's say, which they call the Fikr Madhab, which is the Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi,
Hanbali.
and Hanbali. So the Hanbali school of thought is what you have in Saudi Arabia, and the extreme version of it is what is called Salafism, or the I don't
Wahhabism.
know, Wahhabi, exactly, Wahhabism. So this is the one they are trying to export to Africa, because most Africans, if you ask them, they tell you they're Muslim, because a lot of them don't really subscribe to this idea of sect, but most of them are Sunni, which they follow the mostly Maliki. Mostly, if you go to places like Senegal and and Gambia and Mali and Burkina Faso all the way to Africa, most of them follow the Maliki school of Islamic jurisprudence. So the Saudis are in Mauritania. They are all over Africa, and they are pumping money through some of these charities and mosques and so on
Exactly.
and so forth. So when I hear on the news and they're talking about extreme radical, vile terrorist Iranian system, and I'm like, hang on a second. But that is not happening here. And then you have people in Nigeria taking it from the media, knowing
Yeah.
fully well that the Boko Haram in the northern part of Nigeria, the ideology they are running away with is not Usuli Tuafa, or it's not even Zaidi Shiaism. It's not on the basis of the
Yemen.
one in not yeah, Zaydis are the ones in Yemen, and you have the Alawites. And by the way, I
Yeah.
heard that the Alawites were not even considered Shia until the fatwa from uh,
Yeah, and it's
Musa
a
al Sada.
political one and not a religious one. Precisely. It's a political one due to their minority status in their lands and not a religious one at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the game again. The Saudis, and you talked about the Shia revival, which is a book that you recommended
Yes.
that I saw. I saw because it was in. I think there was a conference he attended, or there was
Yeah.
there's a video of him on the Council on Foreign Relations, which is
Yeah.
something I found out about, like 2014, the Shia
Yeah.
revival. Valid
It's a
Nasser,
great book.
very, very intelligent guy, and he
Yeah.
broke down most of the things you said. So the Saudis, again, on from the political front, the young people are also subscribing to this. I saw the war between Iran and Israel, and you have a lot of Egyptians saying, "Yeah, we don't like Israel, but you guys and the Iranians can go settle your scores. We're not interested. We don't." Basically, they were is the right word, aloof. They were not interested basically about it.
I don't
There was
believe that
no
to be true at
passion.
all. I think they were rooting for Israel. Like, I don't believe they were not siding there. I think they were too scared to say, I'm actually secretly rooting for Israel here. Genuinely. And again, you know me to tell the truth. And I would have
Mhm.
appreciated it if people said the truth. So in Arabic, they would say things like, Allahumma drub al-dhalimina bid-dhalimin, which means, may Allah ruin the enemy, my enemies with my enemies. And if you translate that sentence, that actually translates semantically exclusively to "I hope Israel wins," which is absolutely batshit from an Egyptian, considering the expansionist projects that Israel has towards Egypt. That's the
It's
part that I
crazy.
think scares me most.
Yeah, and here's something I don't understand. This level of acquiescence and bending over backwards for Israel makes no sense, because if you look at the Israeli press, they're already saying that Egypt, the Sinai, is holy to Judaism. The
Holy land.
Sinai, yeah, it's a holy land, basically, and that they will go back to Sinai. They are praying for the day they will go back to the Sinai. And they're even saying within the Israeli press, and they're playing this game of deception and say, "Oh, we have an agreement with you. We have a treaty with you. We will never attack you. We don't have any problem with you." And using that as a facade, or creating this impression that everything is fine until they are done with Lebanon and Syria and they have enough strategic depth, and then they go
Exactly.
for Egypt and, in particular, Jordan. Jordan is weak. Think about what Israel
Right.
can do to Jordan. And the Jordanian government used their defense system to side with Israel during the war with Iran.
Exactly.
Jordan, Syrian airspace. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was in France, and he said that no agreement must be reached with the Iranians, that Iran must be destroyed. Basically, with the French president Emmanuel Macron, I will never trust the Europeans, staying there and calling for de-escalation. The Crown Prince was giving him lectures about the agreement they signed with Hitler in the 30s, and how that
Right.
helped Hitler to continue, referring to the Iranians, or not the Iranians, to
Yeah.
the Iranian government, that the Iranian government must be destroyed. This is what I don't understand, because on one hand they say, "Oh, We want to have an agreement with you. Let's see how we can stop the nuclear program. It's not about the nuclear program. I think it's deeper than that. And in respect to what you said about they're scared of the Shia revival. And this 1400-year-old standoff
Yeah,
between Sunnis and Shia is also exacerbating the situation. And
yeah,
one
yeah.
final point, I think they were disappointed that Israel was really, really smashed during that conflict, and that broke them because they
It did.
thought Israel was invincible. And the fact that the Iranians were hitting Beersheba and people were like, it created tremors. Iranians
Yeah,
taught them a lesson. Of course, they did cause damage in Iran, but the fact that Iran stood on their own and forced the hand of Israel to cease fire,
and
think
America,
about it.
Israel
And the
and
United States.
America. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Israel is not going to listen to anybody. Israel refused any sort of
no,
ceasefire or any sort of cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. They've been going on for 2 years. These guys don't respect weakness. They only
yeah.
respect you when you smash them on the face, as
One
well.
hundred
So,
percent. Rest
yeah,
in
it
peace,
is.
Nasrallah. That's what he said. He said that
Mhm.
they don't respect weakness. Nobody respects weakness. You have to fight with grit, or you'll get walked all over. And I think that's what the rest of this Jordan, Egypt. The funny part is, even Syria and Lebanon will figure out a way to stand. They'll get hurt, but they'll get up. Uh, they've had Lebanon more than Syria. They've had experience fighting this Israeli before.
Mhm.
Jordan doesn't, and Egypt has forgotten what it's like to fight. They are, uh, 150 million people just out there singing and dancing all day long, hoping for their food basket. It's not working very well for them. So, and
Yeah.
Egypt is so big that it will reverberate to the rest of Africa.
It will. It will have an impact on Africa. This is what I keep saying.
Yeah,
Because look, in Africa here, people have like different opinions about the conflict. And particularly those of us in West Africa that are mostly
right.
those of them that are mostly Christians, and in the South, which have their own problem with the Arabized North. And they think, oh, look, we have the Fulani Christian crisis in the north of Nigeria or in the center of Nigeria. Therefore,
Yeah,
why should anybody support the Palestinians? Why should anybody pay attention to what the Israelis are doing in the region? After all, these are Arabs. Israel should do whatever they want. Let them settle their score. And this is what they're thinking. And my opinion on that is this is very dangerous because you're missing the point. Very,
very
very
much.
dangerous because if you think Africa is somehow, you know, 10 continents away from the epicenter of where this is happening, you're wrong. They are basic in Somaliland. We see what the Israelis are doing. They've been funding militia groups
Eritrea,
in Sudan
Ethiopia.
from the Eritrea, Ethiopia from the 50s. The
Right.
Anyanya movement started in 1955 and Israel was
Exactly.
arming them.
The
Israel
CAR, the
participated.
Central African Republic. Yeah, all of it.
Central Africa, exactly. The fight between the Selekas and the Anti-Balaka. And
Yeah,
even what we're seeing with a whole lot of problems in the Sahel of Africa, but a lot of Africans need to wake up and they think, oh, this is not close to me. It's far away from me. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. And I hope that we realize and wake up. It's not about taking sides, it's about the interest of Africans as well, because we've been walked over by a lot of people,
I agree.
including some of these Gulf countries that we mentioned,
Yeah,
Saudi, the Emiratis, a lot of them, even Qatar, now all of a sudden have interest in Africa.
I
The
agree.
the U, the UAE is supporting different forces in Libya, the forces of renegade General Khalifa Haftar, and then you have Turkey supporting the government in Tripoli. So
Yeah,
again, you see, all of them are interested in Africa, and it's not just the Europeans or America or Israel; it is everybody, and we need to wake up. But again, we have to be strategic because
yeah.
the bigger elephant is the Europeans. We know them very well, like the French, the Americans who are in Africa with AFRICOM, and we see the recent statement by General Langley in relations to the
Hmm.
situation in Burkina Faso. So
Hmm.
it's very complex, and we need to wake up. Exactly the same thing about the Middle East. I think we have a lot in common. We are
We
very
do.
susceptible to this game of divide and rule, and we need to learn.
We do, and we need to learn to listen to the other populations without holding them to our standards. So I think one of the things that is very difficult, or was very difficult through the past 2 years, has been trying to bridge the gaps, because there's, okay, so we can agree that Israel is a disgusting place. It has been committing massacres for X number of years. Okay, we're past that now. Now we have to think, how are these global shifts going to affect us on the smaller level and on the larger? As soon as you're talking expansionist projects, that's a double-edged sword. An expansion project exists in coalescence together with an anti self-sustenance project. So any country that feels like, in Africa or in the Near East, that looks like it's about to gain some sort of economic, or sometimes it's just cultural. So, like, every once in a while, you'll notice America starts to look into Brunei a little bit, and you're like, ooh, I think it's the culture they're into. They're into things that they don't have. So, any population that stands out in a crowd, Nigeria has fallen to this, probably because where you are coastally, they have a good eye on you. McKinsey Group
Mhm.
Consulting has been in Nigeria for over 2 decades now. And the northwest coast of Africa, the diversity in it can provide proper sampling for American ideas. So the idea for America is, again, separate Africans into smaller divisions so they can take over. So stop any Pan Africanism, um, further create religious divide where it didn't exist before, or make tribal divides worse. So if tribes exist, make that worse. If not, make the religious divide worse. That's what their plan is, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's a classical theory of divide and rule, which is, it's as old as mankind, and they've been using this to devastating effect, not just in Africa, but also in the MENA region. So yeah, let's and the final point again, and I appreciate your time. This has been so informative. I hope we could do
You,
more of this if you have time.
anytime.
And yeah, and for those people that are listening, on any platform, do you have like a YouTube channel, or you do have are
You
you
can follow me
more?
on TikTok. You can read my op-ed. Like, I can, you can follow my link. I can send them to you, and my website. I write regularly about this. Sometimes it's just thoughts. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
more
so basically,
particular.
when your name is there, they can search up Nahed Murad
Yes,
and they can
just
find
Google
some of
Mehed
your work.
Murad. Exactly.
Yeah, in relations to this. Yeah, so what do you think would happen what is your crystal ball? What do you think will happen in the next 10 years in the region, geographically, economically, politically?
Yeah, I think the powers are shifting. We are going to become America's favorite pet, because we are going. You can't get rid of America, unfortunately. It just forms into something else and still leeches on. So America's stuck there, but I do see the fall of what we call the Neville Chamberlain appeasement policy. So we're going to start to see more action-oriented policies, a lot less of these, what we call bilateral relationships between countries, which tend, like we see in Israel and America, after a while to behave like an old married couple, and the rest of the countries around them pay the price. So um, economic, really, I see the hub of this becoming Africa, which is probably why you feel it a lot, that they're getting rid of the sides so they can make the hub Northern Africa. Um, and a free Palestine for sure. I mean, I see a free Palestine within hopefully before the end of this year, but that doesn't mean much. That means we will have to pick up the pieces and figure out what to do from there, while the wolves are still at our door. Because just you get rid of the Israeli, that doesn't solve your problem. You still have American interest, you still have Saudi interest, you still have
Turkey.
Iranian interest, and you still have Turkey. All of that, exactly. Russia, China. So
Yeah, so you think Palestine will be free before the end of the
yeah,
year? They're going to be
I
free
to me
politically
Palestine is
with,
already free. Yeah,
yeah, but would that be freedom without land? Because you see the moves that they're making in the West Bank, and now Israel is in Gaza City, bombing with reckless abandon, dropping ordnance from the sky,
Yeah.
incessantly in Gaza City, which has a population of about 1 million people. So the goal is a complete and total annexation of Gaza and squeezing the population down south to the point where they will be forced to either abandon, the country and
Yeah.
leave, or
Yeah. So
what do you think
logically,
when you say freedom? What does that even mean?
freedom from occupation, there will be no more Israel. Israel is dead. She's gone. There will be something known as Palestine. Will the land will be there? They will inherit everything that Israel has built, but that doesn't mean anything. All that means is that they're going to be a terribly traumatized population relying on its expats to come back home in order to build the country. I know that as a person from South Lebanon. Again, it happens overnight where you free your lands, but then you're left to your own whims and devices. And here we are 25 years later fighting the same fight in Lebanon. So it will be free land from the river to the sea, but we will be left, unfortunately, and it's looking like there is going to have to be a fight for the holy rights to that city, to Jerusalem, regardless of the fight for Palestine. Because the fight for Palestine is not religious, but the fight for the holy city is. And so, yes, we will see Palestine free. Jerusalem will still be contested, and we'll have to fight for that. But I think that's a fight between Muslims. It's a Muslim on Muslim fight, to be honest.
Yeah, again, I don't know. I really need to press you on this. In practical
Yeah,
terms,
please do.
what
We can
what
have
do
a
you
whole
see?
other thing about the religious thing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. In practical terms, how do you see this freedom translating to
terribly.
Palestine
It's
getting?
going to be an unarmed, dull state. Terribly. It's going to be unarmed. It's going to be dull. It's going to um I don't see any option of it succeeding at it because I live in the West with my fellow Palestinians, and I haven't heard yet any of them be ready to pack and go help and be back home. So freedom of something uh is not the be all end all. They will get rid of the Israelis because Israelis, honestly, that we know as Israelis, so people who live there because they benefit from supremacy and apartheid and a Jewish ethno state, will pack and leave. Exactly like we saw in South Africa and in any other place where people live there for that reason. Some
Mhm,
people will stay, they will attempt to live with Palestinians, but the coexistence in that trauma is going to be impossible, Sav. Like, again, these are people have these ideas. Lots of NGOs will probably work on this. It won't work.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's been an interesting conversation, and I hope
Always,
I can have you back anytime soon. As we get more
anytime.
updates on the real time situation, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are watching, those of them from Africa, would absolutely love your take on
Love
some
you
of the
guys.
topics. Yeah, some of the topics we've talked about. I'm sure you win a lot more friends and followers from Africa. Yeah, we are watching and monitoring the situation closely, and I hope that there's a solution to this problem. Seeing watching in
There is.
4K, the live streaming of bombs dropping from the sky, and this also impacts on Africa. It's traumatic, and it's
Yeah,
also it's also detrimental to us in the long run in terms of our own position. Because a lot
yeah.
of people, like I said, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this is not my fight. It's not my business," until it hits them. Thank you so much, Dr. Nahed
Always.
Murad,
Thank you.
for joining this conversation. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Always. Thank you guys. Bye.
Yeah, bye.